All right, guys, so today we are going to talk about factoring trinomials part 2. It's going to be on page 31. We are still talking about quadratics. And like I said, it's just part 2. All right, so today we're really going to be focused on what happens when you throw in some of those negatives. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about today is how to kind of tell what your answer should look like. So when your last term is positive, it tells us one of two things. Okay, so when your last term is positive, both factors have the same sign. All right, so what that means is if our last term is positive, so for instance, if we have something like x squared minus 6x plus 5. Okay, so we're looking really at our last term here. Our last term is plus 5, so we see it's a positive number. And that's going to tell us that we either have an x plus number multiplied by another x plus number, or we could have x minus number times x minus a number. So what this means is if this is positive, these two factors will have the same sign, so plus and plus, or minus and minus. They're the same sign. So how do you determine which ones they are? Well, if it has a plus sign here, but it has a minus sign here, okay, that's going to tell us we want to use the minuses, right? If it has a plus sign here and a plus sign here, we'll use the plus signs. But since this one has a plus sign at the back, we know they're both the same sign. A minus sign for the second one that tells us we're going to use minus for both. So we're going to work it out the same way we did at your last class. So we're going to draw a 2x2 box. We're still going to be putting that first term, the x squared. I'll rewrite it for us. So we have x squared minus 6x plus 5. All right. So we're still going to be putting this first term here in the first box, and we're still going to be putting our last term in the last box. Okay, so we've got x squared and we've got positive 5. So what times what gives us x squared? That should be pretty easy by now, x and x. And what's going to give us positive 5? Well, there's really only one set of factors that gives us positive 5. It's going to be 5 times 1, so we don't really have to write out these factors. 5 and 1, because 5 times 1 gives us 5. But the tricky thing is we have to get them to add up to -6. So really, our factors of 5 are 1 times 5 or -1 times -5. That's both going to give us 5. All right. So we want to use the sum that's going to give us -6. So this sum gives us positive 6. This sum gives us -6. So that's the one that we want to use. So we have to say that this is a -1 and a -5. This becomes -5x. This becomes -1x. And when we combine them, it does give us that middle term of -6. So our final answer here is x minus 5, x minus 1. So that holds true to what we just set up here. If the last term is positive, which it is, both factors should have the same sign. And they should both be negative because our middle term is negative. All right, so we're going to do another one. Well, we did a plus one, yes, our last class period. So we said x plus 6x plus 5 would give us that x plus 1 and x plus 5 there. Okay, so if you need help on that one, you can go back to that previous page. The second thing we're going to talk about is when your last term is negative. All right, so an example of this might be like x squared plus 2x minus 15. All right, so here our very last term is a negative, so that's going to tell us something important. So if you think about what creates a negative number when you multiply, it's going to tell you that you have different signs within your factors. Okay, so when your last term is negative, the factors are different. Okay, so that's going to be like we have x plus a number times x minus a number. Or we could also write it the other way and say x minus a number, x plus a number. But when we see this negative sign on our last term here, we want to make sure we have different signs in our two factors there. All right. And then we're going to come back and talk about how do we get this plus 2. Well, this plus 2 really is going to be the addition of these two factors. So we want, if we have a positive here, we want our positive number to be the bigger number. Okay? If we have a positive, we want our positive to be bigger. All right. So we're going to go ahead and work this one out. We'll draw a 2 by 2 box. I'm going to rewrite our problem. We're going to fill in our first and last box. All right, x and x is going to give us that x squared. And we want factors that will give us negative 15. So this is what we started with in the last period. So we're going to talk about our factors, and then we're going to talk about the sum of those factors. All right, so factors of 15, that could be 1 times 15. Remember, we want it to be negative 15. So we could do negative 1 times 15, or we could do 1 times negative 15. Okay, either one of those will give us negative 15. We could do 3 times 5, but if we wanted negative, we could do negative 3 times, not 15, sorry y'all, negative 3 times 5, or 3 times negative 5 would also give us that 15. So those are our factors to get to negative 15. So we want to talk about our sums. So we have 4 different sets of factors. We need 4 different sums here. We're looking for the sum of positive 2. All right, so we're going to look at negative 1 plus 15 would give us a positive 14, not what we want. 1 and minus 15 would give us negative 14, again, not what we want. Negative 3 and 5 is going to give us a positive 2. 3 and minus 5 would give us a negative 3. Remember, we're finding the sum. So we're looking for the one that equals our middle term, which is this 2. So we want to go with the matching factors, which is going to be negative 3 and positive 5. Now, it doesn't matter where you put it. Negative 3, positive 5. We could have put positive 5 up here and negative 3 here. Still would give us the same thing. So we have negative 3 times x is negative 3x. X times 5 is 5x. When we combine these, we've got to make sure that they do add up to that positive 2x, and they do. So our final answer, remember, based on our information here, we should have factors with different signs, which it looks like we do. So we have x minus 3 and x plus 5. You could have also written this as x plus 5 times x minus 3, because we know we can multiply in any order and we'll still get the same product. All right, so we're going to do a little bit different one this time. It's going to be very similar to this, but instead of a positive number for our second term, we're actually going to end up with a negative number. So going back real quick before we start the next one, remember how when we talked about our second term here, is a positive, that tells us that our larger number here, so 5 is our larger number, that has to also be positive. Okay, so the next one that we look at is going to be where we have a negative number here, which means our negative number in our answer needs to be larger. Okay, so we're going to look at our next one, which is going to be x squared minus 4x minus 12. Okay, so again, when we look at this very last term, if it's negative, that tells us that the two numbers that we multiply together have to give us a negative number. The only way that can happen is if we multiply a positive times a negative, or a negative times a positive if that's how you choose to write it. Okay, so we're going to draw our box. We're going to fill in our first term and our last term. X times x is going to give us that x squared. Okay, and we want these two boxes right here to give us that negative 4x when we combine them. So this negative right here, this negative 4, is going to tell us that our bigger of the two values needs to go here. Okay, so we're going to list out our factors of negative 12. And again, remember, we're going to use two sets of factors for each one. So we could have negative 1 times 12 or 1 times negative 12. We could have negative 2 times 6 or 2 times negative 6. We could have negative 3 times 4, or we could have 3 times negative 4. That's going to give you your 6 different factors for negative 12. Now we want to come up with the sum that's going to equal negative 4. So negative 1 plus 12 is going to give us positive 11. 1 minus 12 is going to give us negative 11. Negative 2 plus 6 is going to give us positive 4. 2 minus 6 is going to give us negative 4. Negative 3 plus 4 gives us 1. And 3 minus 4 gives us negative 1. So we want to find the sum that matches the middle number. That's going to give us negative 4, right? So that matches with these two factors right here. So those are the ones we want to use. So we're going to be using negative 6 and positive 2. This is going to give us negative 6x, positive 2x, and when we combine negative 6x plus 2x, we are getting that negative 4x. Make sure when you put them in here that your larger number, see how that 6 is our larger number, that's going to remain negative in order for us to get that sum of negative 4. On Friday, we're going to do some special case scenarios. So I would like for you to try your best to finish your IXL by class time on Friday. If you need a little bit of help, I am running tutoring sessions Wednesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon. All you need to do is shoot me an email and we will schedule a time.